could take seats now, please. I just want to mention one thing to my people in my class. I just received, actually this was last night, an article, this publication called Memories and Dreams. I'm a member of, I'm a subscriber to the National Baseball Hall of Fame publications, and so we get this 4 times a year. It's kind of interesting because I was talking in the class about how baseball is such a radio game, and of course, Mark Giamatti had talked about that in Green Fields of the Mind. So in this article, in this issue, there's actually an article called Giving the Game Its Voice. Baseball and radio have proven to be a perfect marriage for 90 years. So what I'm going to do is I'll see if I can get the Hall of Fame to allow me to post an electronic copy online. If not, I'll copy it for everybody and pass it out in class because it's an interesting article. Without further ado then, I want to thank Bill Giles for coming in once again. This is the 10th anniversary of when he came to St. Joe's the first time. He's now come, this will be his 12th time because I'll never forget when I asked him to come the first time, he said, sure, I'll come out to St. Joe's. This was back in spring 2001, the first time we taught the baseball class. And he said, what do you want me to talk about? And I said, well, I actually have 2 topics. And I gave him the topics, and he said, okay, I'll come out twice. And he did. And ever since then, he's been coming out once a year to talk. 1 year, instead of coming here, we visited Citizens Bank Park, which was the second day it was open, and got a great tour, including the clubhouse and on the field and everything, although we weren't allowed to touch the grass. Mike Burkhalter is very, very possessive of his grass. But anyway, Bill Giles has grown up in baseball from the time he was a child. I'm not going to go into everything about what he's done, but he's worked in the minor leagues, he's worked in Houston, he's worked in Philadelphia since 1970, he helped close Calumet Stadium, he helped open Veterans Stadium. He had a vision, which he talked about the first time he was here back in 2001, of building a baseball-only ballpark in Philadelphia, which was a process that was already in play by that time, and actually said to the class, once we open the ballpark, we're going to have the revenues to really compete, and God bless it, it's absolutely happened, as we know. Bill Giles is the son of Warren Giles, who is in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, longtime owner, president of franchises, Cincinnati Reds in particular, and then National League president from 1951 to 1969, when league presidents still actually were the ones who made decisions and baseball wasn't centralized. Bill came to Philadelphia, as I said, in 1970. His goal all through his youth and early career in baseball was to own a baseball team. He'll talk about how that came about. And he was CEO of the Phillies from 81 to 97, stepped down from the CEO spot to really focus on building the ballpark, and continues to be involved with the Phillies as chairman. The Phillies are, as we know, the class of the National League, and we fully expect them to win another world championship this year, although, Bill, that puts pressures on. I actually emailed Bill when they signed Cliff Lee and said, congratulations, this is a tremendous thing. I can't remember exactly what he said, and his response was, this scares the hell out of me. Expectations are going to be off the charts, and they have been. But anyway, please welcome Bill Giles.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's always fun to be with you all, and John, good friend. He's going to write a book about me, another book. Right.
Don't let it till it's done.
Somebody asked me the other day if I'd been in baseball all my life, and I said, not yet. I was literally raised in a baseball park. My father, as John said, was president of the Cincinnati ball team, and my mother died when I was 6 years old. And I was the only spoiled child, and so I hung out with my dad at the ballpark all the time. So baseball's been in my blood all my life. The first job I ever had in baseball, way back when I was 12 years old, in those days the radio, and there wasn't any television then, and the radio broadcasters did not travel with the team. They sat in a little room about 4 by 10, and they looked at a ticker tape, and they would make up what happened. It would only say 2B, and the guy would say, here's the pitch, it's a curveball in the outside corner, and it's line drive down the left field line for a 2-base hit. And he would make all this up, and the only thing he knew was it was a double. And it was my job. It was a very difficult job. I had a 2x4 piece of wood in front of me and a wooden mallet. And when the announcer would say it's a base hit, I would hit the piece of wood with his mallet. You need a PhD to do that. One of my jobs in Houston, I was the PR guy, and we had the first big fancy scoreboard. It did all sorts of things. And there was an umpire named John Kibler who kicked out a player in 4 consecutive games. So I put in great big letters on the scoreboard, Kibler did it again. Well, the fans started to boo him and throw things at the umpire. And the next morning I get a call from my father, who happened to be president of the National League and head of all the umpires. And he said, Bill, who was it to put the message on the board about the umpire? And I said, gee, Dad, I'm not sure who it was, but I'll tell him not to do it again. Well, when you find out who it was, tell him his allowance is cut off, will you? My job, or I felt in my whole life, my goal is to make people happy. I promoted high school dances. I've done a lot of crazy things when I was young. But when I came to Philadelphia, I said, my job is to make people smile. And there was a banner one night at Veterans Stadium that says, Bill Giles makes smiles. And I did a lot of crazy things to make people happy because the team was not good. And we had to have concerts. I had an ostrich race. I had a duck race. And then, of course, on opening day, that was always my big deal because in Cincinnati, where I grew up, they would let kids out of school on opening day. And they had a parade. And when I came to Philadelphia, I said, what do you guys do opening day? I noticed your attendance is only 10,000, 15,000. They said, well, we have the Salvation Army Band and a city councilman throughout the first ball. I said, we got to do something unusual, create attention and tell the Philadelphia world that the season's underway. So the first year I had the first ball of the season dropped from a helicopter 200 feet above the field, and our catcher caught the ball. So I said, gee, we have to do something like that every year. So I read in Sports Illustrated about a guy that jumped off of a cliff with a kite on his back. And he lived out in the state of Washington. So I called him up. I said, sir, can you jump off the roof of my ballpark and glide with your kite into home plate and bring in the first ball? And he said, well, let me fly out there and take a look. So he looked at the ballpark and he said, if you build me a ramp about 10 feet wide, I'll water ski down the ramp with his kite on his back. I said, that sounds pretty cool. So I spent $5,000 building this stupid ramp over the seats in right center field. And it was the year that the players went on strike for a week, and the kite man called me and said, sir, I can't come a week later. I got to go down to Mexico and teach the president of Mexico how to water ski. And I said, oh dear, what am I going to do? And we had advertised quite heavily, come see the kite man. Well, I looked in the yellow pages, couldn't find kite man anywhere in the yellow pages. But a guy who ran a hardware store out in Paoli heard about the kite man not being able to come, so he called me and said, I got a friend down in Florida that can do that for you. So I flew him up. His name was Howard Johnson, and he was at Cypress, had been working at Cypress Gardens doing kite trips. And I showed him the ramp. I said, sir, can you water ski down that ramp? He said, no, I don't think so, but if you get me some roller skates and pull me behind a car on that street out in front of your ballpark, I can get up high enough and glide down into the ballpark. Well, I called the police chief and I said, I got this idea, and explained it to him. He said, no, it'll mess up traffic, can't do it. So I went back to my new friend, Roger Johnson. I said, sir, I offered you $1,000 to go down that ramp. I'll make it $1,500 if you do it. He said, okay, I'll do it. And then I said, would you mind practicing? And he looked at me and he said, sir, if I'm going to kill myself, I want somebody beside just you watching me. So here it was, opening night, we're playing St. Louis, 44,000 people. It's a cool, windy night. Time to have the kite man go down the ramp. So I go in the PA booth and I tell the PA guy, time to introduce the kite man. do this very elaborate introduction. First time in the history of Major League Baseball. Here's the great kite man. Well, he doesn't move. And I wait a minute. I said, he must not have heard us introduce him again. So he does this elaborate introduction again, and the organist does a drum roll, and the guy doesn't boo. Well, by now, the Philadelphia fans are booing, like sometimes they do. And so I called on my walkie-talkie with one of my sales guys who's up there with him, and I said, doesn't he hear the introduction? Yeah, he hears it. He's just scared. I said, well, give him a little push. So he starts down the ramp. The wind hits him, knocks him into the seats. He knocks out about 8 seats. I think the poor guy's dead. The fans are booing like hell. But he gets up on his feet and throws the ball toward home plate, and it ends up in our bullpen. But it got so much attention that we had him back the next year. We made the ramp a little wider, and he crashed in center field. So those are the dumb things I used to do. But when you're not winning, you got to do crazy things like that. We gave away jackets. We had, as I said, a duck race. We had a cash scramble. But the best promotion, there's 2 great promotions to get people into the seats. One is having a very, very good baseball park. And second is winning ball games. And we are fortunate. Back in 1992, I went to Camden Yards in Baltimore, and I saw what the Baltimore Orioles had done with the baseball park. And I said to myself, this is what we have to do in Philadelphia. I grew up in a little ballpark called Crosley Field. It had 30,000 seats in Cincinnati. And it was really a baseball park, not a sports facility. The Vet was a sports facility where the Eagles played and where we played. But it was not fan-friendly, it was not cozy, it was not baseball only. So in 1992, I sat on my ways and went to every political fundraiser there was, state and city, and tried to get $200 million from the city and the state. I was thinking it would cost $300 million to build it. The Phillies would put in $100 million, city $100 million, the state $100 million. I finally got the $200 million from the city and the state, and it turns out the ballpark cost $420 million, and we had to put in $220 million ourselves, the Phillies owners. But we built it, and the acceptance of that ballpark has been phenomenal. When I had my dream of building it, I had no idea that it would turn out as well as it has. People love to be there. 67% of the people that go to the ballpark at Citizens Bank Park go with another member of their family. And that's what, to me, baseball is all about, is going to a baseball game as part of your family. You go to an Eagles game, that's not true. Or even a Sixers game. Excuse me. But you have a good ballpark, you have more money. To give you an idea, when we played our last year at Veterans Stadium, we only had $90 million in revenue to spend on whatever. This coming year, we'll have $270 million. We'll have 3 times as much money to spend on player payroll, farm system, whatever. And that's why we're 7-2 favorites to win the World Series. I was shocked when we signed Cliff Lee. I had no idea that Ruben Amaro was even thinking about signing Cliff Lee. But when we couldn't sign Jason Worth, we offered him $17 million a year for 3 years, so a total of $51 million. And then he got that 7-year deal for $125 million or whatever it is with Washington. We had a little money left, so very kind of sneaky. Ruben Amaro, without telling anybody, made a deal with Cliff Lee. And Cliff Lee did not want to play in New York. His wife didn't like New York. And I found out in spring training they didn't want to play in Texas because they didn't like the owner, whose name was Greenberg and who consequently has been fired. So they really wanted to play in Philadelphia. Their little boy has leukemia. Now it's no longer a problem, but it was a couple of years ago. And they send them to Children's Hospital. And she was so happy with that hospital. That was one of the reasons that she convinced Cliff to come back to Philadelphia. The Phillies this year are good, but I worry about our offense. You know about our starting pitching, and it should be outstanding. Our bullpen has been better than I thought it would be so far. But our offense, although we scored a lot of runs against the Mets in Houston, we didn't play a very good team. So I'm really worried about whether we're going to score enough runs to win it all this year. But as I said, we are 7-2 favorites in Las Vegas. So if you got any money, go bet on us. I want to talk a little bit about the business of baseball. The games are the fun part. The business is a little more difficult than just trying to win a ball game. There's been a great evolution of revenue streams. When I was first, excuse me, I have a cold. First going to baseball games, the only revenue a team had was ticket revenue, selling a scorecard, hot dog, Coke, and a beer, peanuts, popcorn. That's all the revenue you could get. Then the evolution, you started to get money for radio broadcasts. People got paid, or you got paid as a ball team for broadcasting your games. Then along came over-the-air television. Then the next hurdle was cable television. Cable television is really what changed the economics of baseball. The Yankees and Mets, ourselves to some degree, started getting a lot of money for cable TV. And that is what caused the disparity. There's disparity in revenue. The Yankees started spending a lot more money than, say, the Pittsburgh Pirates or Milwaukee Brewers,